Hey everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing something really special. Today, February 11th, is International Day of Women and Girls in Science. Now, to celebrate this day, I decided to ask my Instagram community what they thought that we should do, and they all voted to share some of the best advice that they received as women in STEM going through their journey. So in 2015, the United Nations decided to establish February 11th as the International Day of Women and Girls in Science because there is a very large gender gap when it comes to women in STEM fields, and they understood the importance of increasing the number of women within those fields and just how important that's going to be to the fields overall. If you want to learn more about this day and what the UN and other organizations are doing to celebrate and to help increase the number of women and girls within these STEM fields, you can go to womeninscienceday.org to learn more. So after reaching out to my community and asking for their input, here is some advice that women in STEM have received during their journey. Number 1, don't be afraid to let your boss know you're stretched out thin and need some help. This is so important. Burnout is something that is extremely common within STEM fields, and unfortunately, a lot of supervisors may not realize when their employees are getting burnt out. The same thing goes for if you're a student and your teachers may not be as involved in your day-to-day life, and they may not actually notice that you're going through burnout. You might not notice it either. If you're interested in learning more about the signs of burnout, there's an article from Psychology Today that shares a lot of different symptoms that you may be experiencing that could actually be coming from burnout. You can check that out here, or you can check out my Instagram post where I kind of summarize that all together. So piece of advice number 2 is specifically for if you're writing a dissertation or your thesis or some other big project that you've got to write for school. The piece of advice is very simple. Just write it. I think that I know personally I can get very wrapped up in trying to make sure that everything is perfect, trying to make sure that I've got enough background information and I've done all of my research before I even get started. And getting started sometimes is the hardest part. So that advice to just write it is actually really helpful because you don't have to be perfect right in the beginning. Your first draft does not have to be perfect. You can take the time to just start writing, get something down on that paper or on that computer, because let's be honest, we're going to be typing it. Just get something down first and you can always make edits later. But if you haven't even started writing it, you can't do that. If there's something that you're working on, a project that you're trying to get done, a thesis that you have to write, great piece of advice is to just write it. Just get started. Number 3, even the most accomplished scientists have had failures and don't always know the answer. This is key. This is so important for us to remember as women in STEM, is that feeling of imposter syndrome. Thinking that we're not good enough, thinking that we don't know enough, we're not smart enough, all of those negative thoughts that end up popping in our heads and make us compare ourselves to other people and kind of make us want to shrink and feel like we're not good enough to be where we are. I think that remembering the fact that even those top scientists, whether that's in your school or at your job or just the scientists that you see on TV or that you learn about online, even they have had bad days, even they have had failures, and they don't always know the answer either. So just because you don't know the answer to something doesn't mean that you're a bad scientist. It doesn't mean that you don't belong in that field. You absolutely belong. You deserve to be where you are. If you're working towards a big goal and you make a mistake along the way, that's okay. We all make mistakes along the way. And I think that we tend to get kind of wrapped up in our own heads sometimes and forget that fact. Just having that reminder that even the top, best scientists and people in these STEM fields, the people that we look up to, they make mistakes too. They might not always talk about it or show it, but they make those mistakes too. So do not beat yourself up if you're making mistakes or you have a failure within your experiment or something that you're working on, because everybody does. And the last piece of advice is have the confidence of a mediocre white man. You are better and will go farther. This is funny and also true. So, especially as a person of color, especially as a woman of color, we tend to be compared to other people in a different way. We tend to either have been taught or feel like we have to work harder, do more, step up, show up more just to get to the same level as other people who may not be people of color. I think that there's a big gap when it comes to genders, not just within STEM fields and the number of people represented in those fields, but also in wages. You know, women tend to make less money than men, period, no matter what field you're in. Women of color make less money than white men. We make less money than white women. It's that feeling of us having to do extra work just to get to the same place that they're in. So there's a quote by Lewis Carroll that actually kind of sums this up really well, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's something like, it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place. If you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that. And I think that's really true when it comes to people of color and women of color especially, is that we feel like we have to run twice as fast, do twice as much work to get to the same level as other people, as people who aren't people of color, as men. So I think that kind of giving ourselves the grace, instead of feeling like we have to be perfect when applying for different positions or when trying to do different things within our fields, thinking of it as if it was someone who didn't have those same like restrictions or mental restrictions, things that we've put on ourselves, things that society has put on us, thinking of it as if we didn't have any of those and just going for it anyway. You know, you hear so many stories of men who don't fully meet the requirements of a position. They apply for it and they get the job anyway. They get the promotion, they get the raise when they didn't fully meet the requirements. We tend to hold ourselves back because we've been taught you have to meet all of the requirements or you're not going to get that, you know? So if we can kind of take some of that out of our heads just for a minute, go for it anyway, you'll end up getting further because you're the one that's putting yourself out there. You're giving yourself the confidence of somebody who hasn't had to deal with racism or misogyny throughout their life. Kind of a heavy topic here, but I think it's really important, especially for women of color too, going through these STEM journeys. It's hard. You know, there's a lot of things that are put on us. There's a lot of things that we're carrying on our backs along the way throughout this journey, and it can get really, really tough. It can be tough mentally, it can be tough physically. You know, we can deal with things like burnout, we're dealing with anxiety, possibly depression, and don't even realize it. So I think having a good community is really going to be helpful as you're going through this journey, being able to share your experiences, the highs and the lows, and to really just get in touch with other people who have gone through the same thing. That way you don't feel like you're alone, and they can actually give you tips on what to do going forward to help you make it through this journey. I love the community on Instagram when it comes to women in STEM. You can search the hashtag women in STEM and you'll see so many different people who are just doing the best they can, sharing their experiences, sharing their highs and lows, and really just tap in with somebody who may be at a position that you're trying to get to, or maybe you're in a position and you can help somebody else who's trying to get to where you are. I think it's a great community, and if you're interested, you can definitely check it out. You can follow me on Instagram at sharanadarcel. I share a lot more about women in STEM, things that can help women in STEM, maybe women in STEM that you should know about, shouting out some of the women in STEM that I've met through this big Instagram community, and also sharing about self-care. You know, I think it's really important that we take care of ourselves throughout these journeys. It can get very overwhelming, very stressful, and if we don't take time to fill up our own cups, we can't pour out into other people. We can't pour out and do the work that we need to in order to achieve these goals. So if you're interested in any of that, I would love for you to follow me over on Instagram. That's at sharanadarcel, or you can follow my blog, which is sharanadarcel.com. I hope this advice helped you. If you are a person in STEM, a woman in STEM, please share some of the best advice that you've received during your journey down in the comments below. I'd love to know what advice helped you make it through your journey, and maybe that piece of advice will actually help somebody else too. Talk to you later. Bye.